Hello and welcome. We are continuing to read Ranger in Time, Night of Soldiers and Spies. This is chapter number 4, Fever Dreams. Chapter 4, Vocabulary. Number 1, throbbed, felt pain in a series of regular beats. Number 2, musket, an infantryman's light gun with a long barrel, typically smooth-bored, muzzle loading, and fired from the shoulder. And there's an illustration of one right below this definition. Number 3, trough, a long, narrow, open container for animals to eat or drink out of. And you can see horses drinking or potentially going to drink out of a water trough in the illustration below. Number 4, appreciate, to be grateful for something. Number 5, quarantine, a state, period, or place of isolation in which people or animals that may have been exposed to infectious disease are placed. Number 6, smallpox, an acute contagious viral disease with fever and pustules usually leaving permanent scars. It was effectively eradicated through vaccination by 1979. And you can see in the illustration below this definition what a smallpox rash looks like. Number 7, contracted, caught or developed, a disease or infectious agent. And number 8, staggered, walked or moved unsteadily as if about to fall. All right, if you have your books handy, open up to page 21 and follow along as I read chapter 4, Fever Dreams. When Isaac woke, he was in a barn. A few chickens clucked around, pecking at the floor. Isaac leaned up on his elbows. Someone had spread a wool blanket in the hay to make a rough bed for him. Isaac looked around. His head throbbed. Where was Joe? Where was the rest of his regiment? Isaac reached into his pocket and felt the scratchy rope against his palm. He remembered rowing through a hail of musket balls in the smoky morning fog. And then, nothing. Wait, had there been a dog? Or had that been a fever dream? Isaac let out a soft whistle. Dog! Ranger looked up. He had gone to get a drink of water from the trough, but he was glad to hear Isaac's voice. Isaac had been asleep for a long time. After he collapsed in the boat, Joe and the other soldiers had carried him to a tent full of other sick men. They'd given him medicine, but Isaac just got sicker. For 2 days, Isaac had drifted in and out of restless sleep until he woke one morning with dark red spots on his face and hands. One of the men helping shouted and ran from the tent. When he returned later that morning, soldiers came with him. They loaded Isaac into a cart and brought him here with the chickens. Ranger had followed them the whole way. He didn't know where his first aid kit was anymore, but he knew that Isaac needed him. Dog, are you here? Isaac called again. Ranger came over and nuzzled Isaac's shoulder. You are real, Isaac said, and you're here. But where was here exactly? Before Isaac could wonder for long, an older man shuffled into the barn with a tin cup of water and some bread. Ranger trotted up to him and licked his hand. Good morning, pup, the farmer said. He set the water and bread down and knelt beside Ranger, scratching his neck with both wrinkled hands. Ranger leaned into the scratch. The man smelled like wood smoke and farm dust and bacon. He was a very good scratcher. Ranger was disappointed when he stopped and stood up to bring Isaac the water and bread. Here you go, the farmer said, handing Isaac the cup. Isaac's hands trembled as he took a drink. How could he be so weak that a cup of water felt heavy? He set it down and looked at the farmer. Thank you, but I have to get back to my regiment. We have to get you better first, son, the farmer said. Get some food in you. He nodded toward the bread. Isaac reached for it and took a bite. As soon as the warm bread touched his lips, he realized how hungry he was. When was the last time he'd eaten? What was he doing here? I appreciate your care, sir, But why was I brought here instead of the camp hospital? You're under quarantine, the farmer said, lest you spread this disease all through the Continental Army. I can care for you here because I've already had smallpox. Smallpox? Isaac's voice trembled. He looked down at the spots on his hands, and his heart raced with panic. The disease had raged through Marblehead like a wildfire just 3 years before, killing neighbor after neighbor and terrifying the town. How could he have contracted smallpox? He couldn't be trapped here, sick. What if the troops had to cross another river? Isaac struggled to his feet. He had to get out of this barn. He had to get back to his regiment. He had to get back to Joe and Colonel Glover and General Washington. He staggered toward the door and collapsed. Ranger rushed to his side and sniffed at his face. Isaac was hot again. The farmer eased Isaac back onto the blanket and held the cup to his lips until he took a tiny drink. You'll get back to the army, son, he said quietly, but first you have to survive. Chapter 4, Comprehension Questions. Question number 1. Why is Isaac under quarantine? Sample answer. Isaac is under quarantine because he has smallpox. Isaac is separated from the rest of his regiment to stop this disease from spreading. During the late 1700s, 1 out of every 3 people infected with this virus died. Question number 2. If you were Isaac, what is something you would have worried about while you were under quarantine? Sample answer. If I were Isaac, one thing I would have worried about while I was quarantined is staying alive. During this time period, 1 of every 3 people infected with smallpox died from this virus. And this takes us to chapter number 5.